What's the best way you've seen someone rebel against school rules? Back in the 1980s, there was one kid in my school who was hardcore into the punk scene. Had bright blue, 6-inch high, razor thin, stand up straight mohawk. The principal gave him detention for being a distraction, etc., and his parting words that day were, "And tomorrow, no more blue mohawk." The next day, the kid came in with the same mohawk, only bright pink. Story 2. No hats in school. In high school, junior year, there was this one kid in my grade that was allowed due to him having alopecia universalis, which is basically having rapid baldness. A new teacher wasn't aware that he was allowed to and asked him to take it off. The kid explained why he was able to, but the sub didn't believe him, forced him to take it off, and was being very cruel to him for wearing the hat / his lack of hair. The next day, everyone wore hats to school as a sort of rebellion against the teacher. She got really mad and started yelling at the students and said some nasty things. She got fired. Story 3. Senior year, my school banned jackets. My friend was cold, wore his jacket to lunch, and the VP told him to take it off. Friend pulls out the student handbook and asked where it said he couldn't wear it. VP flips for a while and ends up showing him the "or anything the administration seems disruptive" clause. Friend rolls his eyes but takes off his coat. The next day, friend comes in with the same tweed sport coat the VP wore every day. Story 4. After the Columbine shooting, our school banned black trench coats. For the most part, nobody cared except the mysteriously gothic trench coat kid. He had worn a trademark black trench coat every single day because it made him different, and then all of a sudden the school tells him that he can't do that anymore. So the kid went out of his way to find or make different colored trench coats and wore those instead. My favorite one was covered in duct tape. Story 5. I was at a private school that had rules about the length of boys' hair. One guy in particular always ignored the rule, and the administration would tell him to get a haircut every so often, but he never did. Eventually, when his hair got down to about his shoulders, the principal pulled him aside and told him his hair was twice the allowed length, and by next week it needed to be shortened by half. Monday rolls around and he comes in with half his head shaved and the other half as long as ever. We were impressed by the literal interpretation of the principal's request, but it still ended up with him getting a suspension for a week and he had to shave the other side before he could come back. Story 6. After 9/11, my school made a rule where we had to wear our school IDs. They went overboard quick, handing out detention to anyone who didn't wear one. One kid had his ID blown up and put on a shirt. On the back it said, "Yes, I'm wearing my effing ID." He got detention for not wearing it with the shirt. Story 7. Last day of senior year, we started a food fight at lunch. And by food fight, I mean we drew angry faces on an orange and apple, then faced them toward each other, made a big circle around them, and we all reacted like we were watching a fight. All the security guards ran to break the fight up, only to make their way to the middle of the circle to find 2 pieces of fruit sitting on the ground. Edit. Lots of comments about security guards in school. In the USA, it's just so common I don't even think about its bizarreness anymore. In many states here, schools not only have a security guard, but a police officer as well. Story 8. A buddy of mine was caught messing with his phone during class. Back then, the school rules were that if you were caught, your phone was confiscated for an entire day, and you couldn't get it back until the next day. This was before smartphones, and the rules have changed since the 10 years that I graduated there. So, Buddy hands in his phone, but doesn't seem too worried about it. He waits a couple classes until lunch break and asks me to come with him. He's gonna get his phone back. We go to the staff room where the confiscated phones were held and asks a teacher there if he could copy down a phone number into my phone so he could call his dad later that day. Teacher agrees and gives him the phone. I hand him mine and we wait for him to copy the number. When he's done, he gives mine back and sticks his own phone in his pocket. He was known as a bit of a joker, so when he jokingly said, "Well, thanks a lot, see ya," the teacher immediately laughs, tells him to stop messing around and to give the phone back. Laughing and joking about being caught, he does. But not really. See, he had a second phone, exact same model, except this one was broken. Wouldn't charge anymore, he said. So when he stuck his good phone in his pocket, it was right next to the broken one. When the teacher made him give back the phone, he just gave back the broken one. It was the best switcheroo I have ever seen in my time at the school. He was so fluent, so nonchalant about the whole thing, it was amazing to see. Story 9. Halloween costumes were banned at my high school because some idiots, like 10 years before that, dressed up and used it as an excuse to hide their face while they vandalized the school. My senior year, more than half of the class decided that we would still dress up and march into the school together in the morning. We all knew we would be punished right away, but it didn't matter. I stayed up all night making a suit of armor out of metallic duct tape and cardboard, along with a broomstick horse to ride. The next day, we all gathered in the parking and waited for everyone to show up. People went all out, and there were a lot of amazing costumes, and after waiting for about 20 minutes, we started our march in. The deans had learned of our plan and were waiting for us right as we entered. They started pulling people aside in groups and taking student IDs to hand out detentions. In my group, there was one guy dressed up as an ATM, and when the dean asked for his ID, he started making ATM noises and then slipped the ID out through the slot where you would put your debit card in. It was one of the funniest things, and I was so jealous that my costume was not as clever as his. Even though having so many of us participate was pretty awesome, his costume made that whole event for me. Story 10. We had an awful Spanish teacher in middle school who collectively punished the class by making us write the same sentence 100 times over in detention. On one of these occasions, my friend and I asked if we could type our detention in the computer lab. This was when computers in schools were a new thing, so we could improve our typing speed, and she said yes. Anyway, we didn't do much typing, but we did learn how to write a basic program that printed the same line 100 times over. Update: because this blew up, we didn't copy-paste because our computer teacher took this as a teachable moment and/or opportunity for malicious compliance, and showed us how to do rudimentary programming instead of cheat our way through it. Also, copy and paste might not have been invented yet. Those of you posting solutions need to keep in mind that the program also needs to print the line number before each repeat. Otherwise, how else will Ms. Cortez know you typed exactly 100 lines? Story 11. When I was in high school, there was a rule implemented that if you showed up late to school, you had to go to the front office to get a detention slip. You would then have to give it to the teacher for that period, who would then mark it down, and you were required to go to lunch detention for that day. I figured out by the third slip that literally no one cared, teachers, security, or students, so when I was subsequently late for the rest of the year, I would take out an old slip that I had from a previous detention, walk through school, give it to my teacher to mark down, then take it back. 2. Give to the lunch detention supervisor. But I never went to detention because the front office didn't have any record of me being late. I was late no less than 50 times my senior year, only having been reprimanded the initial 3 times. I even told my parents about it after I had graduated, and even they agreed they thought it was dumb and funny. Story 12. When I was in grade 7, our last day of class, students would always bring in snacks. Our lunch shift was way too early in the day, so by the end of the school day, we'd all be feeling hungry. And we were all told by our teacher that if we didn't have enough to share, we couldn't eat it in the classroom. One day, almost all of us brought in enough food to share, even with the students that didn't bring anything in. We even synchronized the times that we pulled out all of our food. Our teacher was clueless. She had no idea what to tell us. There wasn't any school-wide no food in classrooms rule, so she couldn't run to the principal. Finally, she gave in to our malicious compliance and allowed us to share food for the rest of the period. Story 13. My high school was always issuing new dress code rules for the girls. Mini skirts had to be longer than your arm, no tube tops, etc. One day, all the boys dressed in drag, breaking all the rules. No violations because the dress code specified only girls. Story 14. Elementary school had a ban on extreme hair colors. My brother shows up with fire truck red hair. Principal stops us both as we're entering the school, and she's going off on my brother. She's berating him, saying, "Who do you know that has red hair like that?" Without skipping a beat, Ronald McDonald. Principal just grabbed him, drug him into the office. My 4th grade brain was in shock that he just one-upped a grown-up like that. She called my dad, and he promptly didn't give a hoot. And months later, bro went from red to green to purple. Story 15. I went to a Catholic grade school growing up that had a strict boys' hair length policy. It couldn't touch the collar of your shirt, and I wanted long hair. So the principal came in one day to talk to the class. When she was leaving the room, she called me out for my long hair in front of my classmates. My response was to point to the cross hanging above the door and said, "Jesus had long hair." She didn't know what to say right away and seemed embarrassed, but then pulled me outside and yelled at me to cut it out. Don't mess with Catholic nuns. Story 16. In my private school, boys were required to wear a collared shirt. It wasn't really enforced until one day it was. I was wearing a sweater without a collared shirt underneath, and I had to go back to the dorm and change. I argued that I didn't look ratty or underdressed at all, but they said rules were rules. The next day, I wore a white t-shirt with a collar, cut off from one of my older shirts, stapled to it. It looked terrible, but hey, rules are rules. Story 17. This was prior to smartphones, circa 2002. One of my classmates was a regular class clown. He would buy brownies in the cafeteria and roll them up in his hands so they looked like a convincing piece of crap. He would then do all sorts of antics with this crap. put it on seats, throw it at people, what have you. Obviously, the school staff caught on and he got in trouble. This guy did not go quietly, though. He was required to sit alone at lunch for the entire school year. There were months left before summer. The one teacher who made sure his punishment was severe made regular rounds of the lunchroom to maintain order. She would pass his lone seat during her rounds. One day, he made another very convincing pastry-sourced crap and had it ready for her when she passed. The entire lunchroom was watching out of the corner of their eyes while maintaining an alibi conversation with the person next to them. When she passed, he stood up, snuck behind her, and slipped the pastry crap in her purse that she was carrying on her shoulder, and he quickly ran back to his seat. The lunchroom burst into laughter, and the teacher had no idea why. Until later, of course. The dude was an artist of rebellion. Story 18. Had some vending machines outside the buildings, but due to some asshat vandalizing them, this understandably pissed the school board off. The machines were put off limits, but could not be powered down due to some kind of contractual obligation of constant availability. In an effort to combat that, faculty were posted at the machines during class changes to prevent purchases, but thankfully, no one was posted at the machines during class time. Mind you, this was 97-99 era. We weren't happy, as that was our sole source of caffeine on campus. We decided to heck with that and made purchases during class. Me, being the lithe, tiny guy I was conscripted to be the buyer. While the teacher was either out of the room or indisposed, or let's be honest, intentionally distracted, I would collect cash and requests 4 at a time and hop out the emergency escape window that they had opted to not have an alarm on and walk 20 feet to the soda machine and make my purchase. This went on for some time until the drink companies lambasted the school board for not restocking their dwindling supplies as per contract. They put 2 and 2 together and realized that purchases were still being made. Apparently I was not the only gopher, and lifted the ban on my last year. Story 19. So I went to high school in South Texas, an area in which it almost never snows. For me, this doesn't mean anything, but I have lived in the north for most of my life, so I know what it's like to play in snow. However, somehow it ended up snowing overnight, and by snowing, I mean like what snow looked like in the north, deep. And not just thin and watery, these were immensely heavy flakes. We were all sure that they would cancel school because Texas does not have salt machines or snow plows, and the roads were super slick. A lot of parents didn't want their kids to go to school because they didn't feel comfortable with a bunch of new high school drivers on ice. Yet, alas, they of course did not cancel school. A little rain knocks out our whole district, but a foot of snow and nothing. My mother made us take the bus because although she felt comfortable driving in snow being from Illinois, Texas drivers are more aggressive and the roads weren't properly cleared. I took the bus and it was like being on a safari tour. Kids were taking pictures of the icicles on trees and stuff, all wide-eyed. It was funny. Once we got to school, though, the campus looked like a war zone. No one would go inside and had instead resorted to snowball fights on the entire campus and parking lots. Once the bell rang, of course no one went inside. I watched from the window as the vice principal went to the front of the school and commanded the kids to get inside. Of course, getting nailed in his bald head by snowballs. He finally managed to round up the rogue kids and we all went about first period. I had a relaxed teacher who knew no one would pay attention. Since half the class was missing anyway, she let us act out the Civil War with snowballs and took us outside. While we were playing outside, we all paused as we heard the fire alarm went off. The school came pouring out for the next 2 periods. Dude that pulled the fire alarm is a legend and lives on at our school till this day. He did in fact get arrested, along with another kid that thought it would be smart to throw ice at a cop. That was the one time I saw the high school completely not have a handle on anyone. Story 20. It's not really a rebellion against the rules, but a good friend of mine had a special talent to make teachers like him despite having no respect for the actual school system. He used to study on his own to ace the tests, rarely showed up to classes he didn't like, and still got perfect report cards with high praises from all the teachers. The height of it was where he convinced his homeroom teacher to come pick him up from the beach before an important test. He eventually went on to have a great military career, but if he ever gets into politics, I wouldn't be surprised if he somehow managed to convince everyone that world domination under his rule was their idea. Story 21. So we had this dude Kyle. His name is not Kyle, but he absolutely had Kyle energy, TM. He looked like a typical low-income stoner kid. Long hair, ripped clothes / jeans, beat up shoes, beanies, and socks with weed stuff on them. Now, Kyle was a peculiar kid who spent half his time in detention, rarely ever showed up to tests, and when he did, he would just sleep straight through them. He was pretty rambunctious, kind of funny, but ultimately was one of the trouble children. He was a low flyer, as the assistant principal called him when we talked, since I was also a low flyer. It meant he got in trouble, but nothing serious like drugs or fighting, though everyone knew/thought he was a pothead. One of my all-time favorite stories of Kyle was in our world history class. The teacher absolutely hated him. They always got into it, and honestly, the man would talk very patronizingly to Kyle, and the dude snapped back. Our teacher said, "Get out, now!" And Kyle proceeded to go to the other side of the room from the door. When the teacher asked him what he was doing, he yelled, "Getting my backpack and getting out." There were these kind of cubbies for our bags by the windows, so Kyle grabs his stuff, packs it up, then straight yeets it out the window. What follows is the teacher yelling, "What are you doing?" and Kyle screaming, "I'm getting out!" followed by him dolphin diving out of the friggin' window. It was surreal. Kyle was suspended, came back a few weeks later, did some more stuff, suspended again, came back, was finally expelled. The dude was seemingly doing okay last time I Facebook stalked him. Works at a Chili's now. Story 22. I was in a Christian high school at the time. The day before winter break rolls around, and I had packed a few Toblerone chocolate bars and some notes for the teachers I appreciated the most, with the intention of leaving them as a Christmas gift. Before school, the principal made a public announcement that students were not to give any teachers gifts unless we were going to give all the teachers the same gift. This was obviously a bit of a problem since I couldn't exactly come back the next day with candy bars, so I marched into her office to address this issue. Upon entering the office, I made a show of opening a chocolate bar and breaking off exactly one piece and placing it on her desk. I told her that I was going to give her a full candy bar, but I now had to share her chocolate bar with the other teachers that I really didn't care about that much anyway. That rule was quietly lifted. Story 23. During my senior year of high school, 2008, my school got super strict about cell phones. It got to the point that we weren't allowed to have them out during any point in the day, not even our lunch period. They claimed that we would send each other test answers or something like that. Anyway, a friend of mine who is a year below me was tired of the rule and how rude teachers were when enforcing it. He literally looked at his phone to check the time and got it taken from him for the rest of the day. The next week comes, and he comes to lunch with two older/non-functioning flip phones. He takes the first out and pretends that he's talking to someone on it. A teacher was instantly on him. They walk over, hold out their hand for him to give it up. He looks at the teacher, then proceeds to break the flip phone in half and puts it in their hand. The teacher was speechless. She just walked away without saying anything. He takes the second phone out and does the same thing again. The second teacher thought it was pretty funny. Flash forward to 2015, and I start working at the school as a student mentor. And now everyone is allowed to have their phones out pretty much at any time. How things change. Story 24. In high school, I did the morning announcements with two other guys in front of a green screen every Friday on camera. We chose the background. We were given a lot of leniency because this was in the early 2000s when technology was a little more simple. In the AV room, we controlled every TV in the high school of over 1,000 kids. When Christmas was close, we were told, don't do anything Christmas related because not everyone celebrates it. So the last announcement before the holidays, the screen comes on and in the background there's a sleigh ride video and the three of us pop up and yell, "Merry Christmas!" as loud as we can, dressed in Christmas costumes. Now again, the school cannot turn this off. Only we can. It just so happened that the superintendent was in the building that day, saw the video, and freaked out. It turned into this whole ordeal, and we were almost suspended for 3 days. They stopped letting us do the announcements until there was a petition signed by the school to let us do it again because we were actually pretty freaking funny, and most of the gags we pulled were innocent. Like eating creamed corn out of the can in less than 10 seconds if enough cans were donated to the food drive. When they let us come back, they said we couldn't make jokes and we had to have a neutral background. So, we went forward with our plan. When the announcements turned on for the first time since near our suspension, we had no background, just a green screen. Me and the other guys just wore white t-shirts. We read the announcements without as much as winking minus the occasional moan. It would be like, today for lunch, the school is serving, pizza, serving pizza. At first, it was minimal, but at the end of it, it sounded like we were having a mini orgy. We read the last announcement, said goodbye, and then started acting like the announcements were over, and like we didn't know we were on camera. We stood up in our boxer shorts and walked off camera. After about 10 seconds, our buddy Scott stood up from under the table, wiped his lips off, took a big swallow, and walked off camera. That time we were suspended. Story 25. Vaping in school is an issue, and I would never recommend starting if you don't have a smoking problem. I am in high school but was addicted to cigarettes early on, so I swapped over. I go to a private school, so we have a great change room plus workout area with machines and everything. However, the change room started to get locked due to vaping kids and detectors were put in. As a solution, after a workout, a bunch of friends and I would turn on all of the showers and strip down to only towels. If we heard the principal walk in to check, it was a big problem for a while, we would all drop our towels and hide the vapes and yell at him, old angry Italian man, that he is a pervert and is creeping on underage male students. He stopped doing that.